Computer. All right, and we are live. All right, so again, my name is Jared Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Transit Matters. I'm really excited to be here talking about the Fairmount Line, and I'm joined with Ethan Finlan, our Regional Rail Lead. All right, so let's kick this off. All right, so a little bit about Transit Matters. Transit Matters is a transit advocacy group, that tries to bring together sort of the wonky side of transportation, but also with the people focus. We like to say that we're data driven, but people focused and people centered, and that's we try to bring that lens to our work, and we really try to look at what are what's world best practice and what are common sense solutions, and the great thing on the Fairmount Line is that a lot of the stuff that we're bringing to the Fairmount Line is not a lot of stuff that we're pushing for on the Fairmount Line is stuff that advocates on that corridor have been pushing for a long time. So really excited to be here and just to be echoing the work that's already been happening. All right, so a new crisis. We've had we had a transportation crisis, even before the pandemic, but now the pandemic has really just exacerbated a lot of existing inequities, but also brought new ones. So we've got really dramatic decreases in ridership on commuter rail across the whole system. 7% at peak AM rush hour, with an all-day average around 11%. We've got the bus service having to really cope with both a rising number of people coming back, but also trying to keep distancing in effect, and trying to keep crowding low. And so really the only sort of silver lining from these terrible numbers is that it emphasizes a point that we've thought for a long time, which is that commuter rail as a model is not very sustainable and is somewhat obsolete. Having a system that is having a very expensive system that is designed just for a relatively small band of workers, and then even within that, really limiting them as far as the hours that they're able to travel is just not the best idea. And so we really need to shift to a new model, that provides a lot more economic mobility, both in terms of access to more jobs and access for more people. Supports the fact that more than likely coming out of this, we're going to have folks who are working at home part of the time and in the office part of the time, likely to have staggered shifts, and even before that, even before the pandemic, we had already seen a shift towards sort of new working models, and towards folks who towards companies where it's no problem to come in at 10 or 11 o'clock, because folks are going to be working until 7 or 8. And this new model provides a much more affordable service than the sometimes up to $20 round trip that you currently see on commuter rail. And so this vision is regional rail. We've talked about this quite a bit, and it really boils down to sort of 5 main things. And we really stress that when we put out our report back in February of 2018, it was sort of a high level vision, but we've really spent the last 2 years really drilling down on that, and really making this concrete. And the 5 things, we'll go through them super quickly. It's faster, clean energy trains. It's high level platforms that provide universal access for persons with disabilities, for families with strollers, even for someone with a temporary injury, and even just someone with heavy bags coming from the airport. It's looking at what are strategic investments that we can do to relieve bottlenecks. We're blessed in Massachusetts to have one of the largest and most comprehensive suburban rail systems in the whole country. And there are a few areas where we have made some silly mistakes and have taken out double tracks, or we've got pinch points, but we can relieve that, and we can have a system that that people really envy. It's frequent all day service. There's a saying that frequency is freedom. So being able to knowing that if you need to take that extra meeting, if you need to go back to your child's school, knowing that there's going to be a train there in a reasonable time frame, and not having to check a schedule, really unlocks so many capabilities. And then it's also, free transfers and lower fares overall. And something we're working on adding to this soon is talking about the real importance for low income fares. Not only do we need to lower, we think we need to lower the commuter rail overall, particularly during off peak hours and in reverse peak travel, but we also need to make sure that that we have access for low income riders. All right, and we've got. So earlier this year, we laid out sort of the first phase of that, and we laid out, okay, what does it look like to start transforming commuter rail? And there's some section of the what's called the Environmental Justice Corridor on the north side, which goes from Boston to Lynn and Salem. That's omitted here just for clarity, so we can really focus in on the Fairmount Line. But this gives you an idea of the scale, of breadth that we're talking about here. Oh, yeah, so we're talking about electrification, again, the high-level platforms, and we're talking about service every 15 minutes or better. Oh. All right.
So I'm just going to start off by talking about the need for better service. Thanks to Jared for the introduction. So as Jared said, the Fairmount Line needing better service is nothing new, right? There, long before we came on the scene, really, I think for 3 decades at least, I think there's been a really strong local advocacy push to get frequent service that's not this sort of commuter rail mindset, but that's really part of the rapid transit system for the city of Boston. And then just need to press the next button for the next thing to pop up. Okay, there we go. So this is a graphic from a study that several of you might be aware of that the Boston Foundation commissioned in the last few years. One of the things they did in that study to look at what the ridership potential was to compare Fairmount Line stations with with stations on the Red Line and the Orange Line. What they found in the case of comparing Opham's Corner and Davis Square was that not only, but was that there was higher actual ridership potential from Upham's Corner in terms of population. The problem is, the Red Line comes every 6 to 10 minutes on the section that serves Davis. But the Fairmount Line, at the time the study was written, might have even been coming less frequently than an hour. So it's, there's this occasional criticism that, the ridership isn't there. But we all know that once service has increased, as it did with when they went to hourly service, and then once they moved most of the line into Zone 1A, ridership went up significantly. So the corridor relies on buses for much of the local travel. The problem is for getting to job centers like downtown and the seaport, the bus trip times are too long. They can be up to 30 to 45 minutes, in some cases even an hour long, and we'll have a display of that later in the presentation. And so just driving home the point that this is an underserved corridor. It's one of the densest, if not the densest, in Boston proper. And the service that exists is woefully inadequate. And modernizing the Fairmount Line gives us a chance to change that in the near term. So one of the main points that we're trying to stress is that the line needs to be electrified. So why is electrification so important? Well, modern electric trains, called electric multiple units, are faster and 5 to 20 times more reliable than what the MBTA runs right now. So this is especially important on a line like Fairmount, where there are multiple stops, because the diesel trains take about 1 minute and 10 seconds to get up to speed and back to speed. the best EMUs take 13. And we're recommending overhead electrification, which is the best technology for this line. You occasionally hear talk about batteries or hydrogen. There was a recent study that said that out of the UK that just said that yes, battery technology is progressing, but overhead electrification is still the best for rail lines like this, and it won't force us to wait many, many more years for the line to be modernized while we wait for unproven technology. And lastly, electrification is essential for meeting the state's 2050 goal of zero emissions, not only by making the rail lines more environmentally sound themselves, but by improving reliability and speed. They can lead to mode shift away from single occupancy vehicles that cause pollution along I-93 that permeates into Dorchester. And this is just a visualization showing just how stark the difference is. The worst electric trains are still 5 times more reliable than the MBTA's trains, which break down on average every 5 to 25,000 miles. So if you want to fix the system and have reliable service, you need electrification. And improving air quality. So this is a map of asthma incidence prevalences in Boston, and as you can see, some of the worst impacted communities are those along the Fairmount Line. So electrification is really essential for helping mitigate that, because as I said, it eliminates pollution both from the trains themselves and from increased traffic. Diesel emissions are a significant pollutant that's been tied back to all sorts of health problems. In fact, studies have shown, unsurprisingly, that COVID-19 has been exacerbated in communities with really high air pollution and really high incidences of disease like asthma, because that worsens the impact. So this really makes electrification more important than ever. And as I've said, it leads to improved overall service, which leads to less people driving and more people taking public transit. So another important component of the Fairmount Line's modernization is step-free access. So fortunately, most of the line is already converted to high-level platforms. But as you know, at Fairmount and Reedville, passengers still have to walk up steps to board. And, you know, all of us at some point in our lives are going to have some sort of situation where that's going to make things at best really inconvenient and at worst pretty intolerable, you know, whether it's falling down and breaking your leg or a pregnancy or another situation. Just having that step-free access really counts, both for rider comfort and for accessibility, and for less time spent waiting at the station. You know, if you get on a really crowded commuter rail train to stop without a high-level platform, it can take up to 4 minutes to get everybody on board. So it's the more high-level platforms you have, the faster your trip is, and you leave no rider behind. So there's already service improving on the Fairmount Line. At the beginning of this year, the MBTA improved a pilot with 8 additional weekday trips. So one of the things that pilot did was scheduled the new trains around when school was opening or getting out. There's several schools along the line. So really targeting those new trips at students, so not just 9 to 5 commuters into downtown Boston. So that was a really positive thing to see. So the line now has 24 total trips per weekday. And with the T's recent announcement about where service hours are going to be reassigned, the Fairmount Line is actually going to move from service every hour to service every 45 minutes all day. And the reason for that is because the Fairmount line, along with the line to Brockton and Middleborough, has maintained the most of its riders throughout the pandemic. We mentioned earlier that ridership at one point dropped right around 99%. Um, so, whereas these lines that entirely rely on suburban commuters have just not done well, Fairmount, contrary to what we've heard for years from the skeptics that, oh, it'll never maintain ridership, in fact, has really been an asset throughout this time. So we applaud the addition of new service, but at the end of the day, 45-minute frequencies or any schedule really where you have to look at the schedule itself and memorize the schedule and kind of know when the train's coming just isn't enough. Shifts don't neatly conform to commuter rail, even the best commuter rail schedules. So we really need to move to this more frequent service. So how do we do that? Well, we believe that by 2021, if the T continues to move away from this peak-only model for commuter rail, we can increase service on the Fairmount line at least to half-hourly. So continuing to move away from reliance on a paper schedule and being able to know, well, the train's going to come in a half hour. Moving Reedville to Zone 1A is also essential. The whole line really should be in the same fare zone as the subway, and Reedville is about equidistant to Braintree, which is in Zone 1, effectively in Zone 1A for subways. There's no reason why riders should have to pay up to $5 more to get anywhere on the corridor. And ultimately moving closer to clock face schedules as service increases. So if trains come every half hour, they come at 10 and 40 after the hour every hour, making the rider experience much more comfortable and competitive with driving or the crowded bus trips. So just to drive home the point again, the Fairmount line's longstanding needs really demand this modernized service delivery model. And we believe we can deliver that for $239 million. So building high-level platforms at Fairmount and Reedville, finishing the job on accessibility, and then electrifying the system and running modern trains will deliver all of the benefits that we've talked about. So here's a graph of what service looks like now. You have one train an hour. In what we call phase one of regional rail, it'll increase to every 15 minutes. And then once you have more EMUs online and the whole system is electrified, so you can get more trains in and out of South Station, you can run trains about every 7.5 minutes or better. And that's as good or better as or better than the red and orange lines. So just really moving away from this commuter rail model and making it a fifth subway line for the city. So I'm going to hand it over to Jared, who's going to start by talking about job creation.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, so one of the great things about the plan to transform the Fairmount line is that just this section alone creates 5,700 good paying jobs. And those are direct construction jobs, and these are the kinds of good, high quality jobs that, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan needs. And then in addition to the direct construction, the spillover effect, creates another 5,700 indirect jobs. So this is really a huge job creation project. And that these jobs are throughout the construction, operation, and maintenance of it. So this is obviously the majority of those jobs are going to be up front during construction, but there are still going to be jobs for the operation and maintenance, and again, good high quality jobs. So next, we'll talk about regional connectivity. So one of the things that, is really great about the EMUs is that, with faster acceleration, you're able to add stops and not have a big penalty. So we think that there are a couple of places where, where there's a need for stops, where there's some, decently large gaps. And so one of those would be near Ceylon Park, there where they've got the big blue bridges that cross Columbia Road, and then at River Street down in Mattapan. And again, like I said, the EMUs are fast enough that you can make those additional stops, and that you will still have a dramatically reduced travel time compared to what we have now, and that's even with the new stops. And then projects at the Fairmount Greenway, enable easier access by having increased walkability and bikeability. And then we also believe that bus connections are really key to this. So making sure the bus connections are as easy as possible. Affordable fares is another really crucial part to this. We know that the cheaper fares mean more riders, especially in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Hyde Park, where the average incomes can be lower than overall in the city of Boston. We really need to make sure that that the fares make sense. And luckily for the Fairmount Line, the only place where this is really a large issue for most riders is at Reedville for the Zone 1A fares. But again, we think that that any plan for low income fares has to include commuter rail. One, not only for people in gateway cities, but particularly because there's one corridor right in the middle of Boston with a high percentage of low income riders that's on the commuter rail. So that has to be a part of the plan. Again, we've talked about this, that, not only should connections between commuter rail and the subway and bus be free, but they should be as seamless as possible. So, making sure that the signage is right at those stations, that the schedules are coordinated so that when you hop off of a bus, you've got 2 to 3 minutes, maybe a little bit longer to get to your train, but that you're not, getting off of the bus and you just missed the train. Although, in a world with 15 to 17 minute service, that's certainly a lot better than just missing the train and having to wait another 39 minutes. Right now the bus routes are set up, to take folks to the Orange Line and to the Red Line. But for folks, towards the middle of the corridor, if they were able to transfer to the Fairmount Line, they would have much faster trips instead of having to go through all of the traffic, or all the way through Franklin Park, just to get to the subway. Again, station access is huge, and this is why we think that the Fairmount Greenway is a key part of this, because there's walk sheds for stations that are roughly within a 10-ish minute walk or so. Most folks are happy to do that walk, particularly if you have frequent service, where that if for some reason it takes you a little bit longer to get there, you're going to have a train there. But you start to get longer than that, then you really need to have other options. And having things like blue bikes, having things like bike cages at the station, and having safe cycling routes is an awesome way to increase that transit shed. So better pedestrian and bicycle access, and again, safety and comfort at the station. So making sure that we've got good lighting, signage, that we've got those blue light phones, because another barrier to transit sometimes, particularly for for lack of a better term, more vulnerable users, can be making sure that they feel safe at stations. Scheduling is a key part of this transformation. So operating all day, from 5 in the morning until past midnight, because we know that we have folks who work third shift jobs and work overnight, and so making sure that the train can be an effective option for them is really key. And as Ethan said, really consistent times, so that you don't have to memorizing the schedule. And obviously we're happy that the frequency has gone down, but 45 minutes does lead to some odd sort of math that you have to do in your head. And that we'll be able to increase the speed with EMUs, so that's going to offer much faster trip times. And now we'll see some of those trip times. And so as you can see, really big changes, especially as you go further down the line. So Mattapan to downtown in 15 minutes. I mean, that is a huge change, and particularly for communities like Mattapan and Hyde Park, who have some of the longest, travel times, in the whole, in the whole city. Being able to have that trip time, cut from an hour, from what could be an hour on the bus to 15 minutes is huge. Being able to get from Reedville to downtown in 20 minutes as opposed to the current 30 to 35 minutes is really huge. And then again, as I said, the bus travel times, really, really big savings there from getting from Mattapan. But and this is the bus. These times were yeah these travel times were generated during the pandemic, and so we know that during rush hour on some days, and particularly if there's some kind of accident, that we know that these travel times can be much, much larger. But as you can see, in every case, there's a pretty significant difference. Yeah. And so all of these travel time savings, when you add this up over a week, over a month, this is hours of people's lives that they're getting back. And again, really crucially, this is, reliability of travel time is huge. Not having to wake up, you know, 30 minutes earlier, only to find that the travel time, is shorter. And so then you're at your job, particularly if it's an hourly job, you're at your job early, not getting paid, time that you could have slept in or spent with your kids. And then the same thing for, you think, you need to leave 7 minutes or, 20 minutes early, and then it takes 30 minutes that time, and then you're late and getting disciplined. So really having reliable trip times is a, it's not just something that's a neat luxury. It really can be life changing. So, how do we get there? So we've gotten, the board to commit to modernization, but we haven't necessarily gotten the, the secretary or the state house. So we really need to have, a firm commitment there, in terms of a bond bill being passed, and in terms of a clear plan laid out for how we're going to get there. And under there's some other steps. So the good thing is some of this is already happening. There already is enhanced diesel service, and they already are transforming, transforming the commuter rail, slowly, with COVID as the pretext, as Ethan said. They're adding new trips on the Fairmount Line, but not only just on the Fairmount Line, they're adding trips on the Providence Line, on the Middleborough Lakeville Line to Brockton, and then on the Newburyport Rockport Line to Lynn. So really targeting environmental justice communities. And so we're really happy to see that, on the fall schedule, they actually added close to 40 new trips, and 80% of those are going to the four corridors that I mentioned, with the Fairmount Line being one of them. The next step that we've got to do is we've got to, almost immediately start the process of buying these new trains, because unfortunately, these trains are not something you can just go to a yard and pick out and drive home like a car. These are long procurements that take 3 to 4 years to do, and so we need to start that. We need to start that process now, and then we also need to make sure that, as important as the Fairmount Line is, and I'm a FITC member, and I live in the corridor. There are communities all across the Commonwealth, that are also, that would also greatly benefit from this full transformation, especially some of our gateway cities, where the travel times, into Boston right now can be, close to 2 hours. All right, so awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. There's our contact information there, but I think a lot of you all have that. But now we'll open it up for questions.
So Rep Miranda had messaged us a question. She was asking, do we have a sense of where most of the Fairmount Line residents work? Pointing out many are in service industries, hospitals, manufacturing, and colleges. So we did, we in the report, which will be coming out shortly, we did look at a significant and find that a significant number of folks along the line are working downtown, and one of the other big clusters that isn't directly served by the line, but can be served by better bus connections is the Longwood Medical Area. So
Yes.
riders for, I think, I don't know if you want to try going back to the uh,
Oh,
the
which
trip.
slide?
Oh,
Ethan,
yes,
if I could jump into,
yeah.
Newmarket never closed through the pandemic.
Mm.
So most of our businesses have been working straight through because they've been providing food to supermarkets and everywhere else and all. And so we've had a lot of our riders still continuing to ride it from, because, 52% of our employees come from within a few miles of where they work. So a lot of them are along the line.
Yeah, I co-sign that, with Sue. And one of the things that I found, because we had to handle a lot of unemployment claims through my office for the service industry workers and folks who are working, Newmarket stayed on. But for those that were working at restaurants or hotels, colleges and hospitals, those were the top four. One thing that I realized is that a lot of them were women. And for some of them, when I talk about the Fairmount Line, even myself, I would probably get on at Newmarket versus Upham's, just because Upham's has this long path. It's dark. The issues along Mass and Cass have definitely gone into North Dorchester. And so there's a lot of safety concerns. And when you're waiting long between trips, the folks are feeling like, the bus is right there, even though it might be crowded, or I don't know if it's going to be clean enough, but at least I know that bus is going to be here in 10 minutes versus waiting on a platform or walking down a dark path and waiting 30 minutes. So I think your report is really on it in terms of the sort of timeliness, but I would also include, sort of branding around safety and lighting as another sort of set of concerns. I also hear a lot from people about the Reedville not being in the zone 1A, even though those folks don't live in my district, having to come up with money, particularly during, this time of, harsh realities of people losing their jobs or being underemployed. Folks are like, that seems very doable. And I know that Nick's office and myself and Russell Holmes and now Brandy, we've all been sort of committed to pushing the T. And if this is another thing that we could get an early win on, I'm committing to help fight for that as well as we did on electrification, just because I think it's incredibly important for folks. And there's a lot of schools now in Hyde Park and a lot of folks who are sort of using the park and ride along that. The last thing I wanted to say was that there is now a planning project going on with the city's Office of Public Service about the underpass under the bridge at Ceylon Park. And I think we should connect these two processes as folks are thinking about how do you activate that space, whether it's art, music, events. And then the park gets used heavily by teams from all across Boston who come and play soccer there. And so I think there's a need to connect both of these processes so that we're not reinventing the wheel. If there's an actual desire to think about a stop, then I would love for those two energies to be connected.
Absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, and in the report, we do talk some about the about safety. I'll take a look and see just how much, but yeah, absolutely. And maybe some of the branding we need to use is not only that the frequency is freedom, but and not the frequency as a substitute for some of the things that you mentioned, like better lighting and things like that. But frequency can also be a safety, issue as well. That if that train is coming every 7 minutes and there's people around there, then that's a much safer environment than a lonely station, by yourself, and the next train is not for may not be for 30 minutes or so. So I appreciate that. Sue, did you have another question or comment? Oh, it's from earlier. Okay.
No, I forgot to take my hand down.
No worries. Do other folks have other folks have questions or comments?
I think
Jared, this is Marcos.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to just comment on the point made about potential jobs created and them being union jobs. From the experience that we had when we were building the original stations, we were fighting for the originals, the new stations. Each station is seen as a different contract, and so there's always this idea of scale. And so I think that we need to figure out how to really engage the right partners that are willing to really create opportunities for younger people to come into the trades, and because you're going to be doing this over a number of years.
Yeah.
So so it needs to be seen as a real sort of training and capacity building opportunity, not just for young people, but also for for contractors, right?
Yep.
That come from the community, because the reality is that some of these large contractors know how to bid and get them, and then they already have their folks, and there's very few new job opportunities that are created. So we have to look at it as a sort of, again, I don't know, 5-10 year sort of effort, and so that it does become a pipeline for our community.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're working on a on an op-ed just to start with Shagun at BECMA, and Betty at Amplify Latinx, and then the next step from that is to really start talking to the T, and really start to have them on the front end, right? Because you're right that this has to be a very intentional process. It's not, oh, we announce that we're putting out the bidding for this, and we have a goal of 15-20% MBE utilization, and we have the goal of X number of jobs being for people in the community, people of color. Like, if that's not an intentional if that's not a process that we're starting nowish for for the bids coming out in 2 to 3 years, then right, like you said, we're going to be we're going to be really behind. So definitely appreciate those comments and noted on that. And like I said, I will make sure I follow up after that op-ed, and when we start having conversations about that. Dustin, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I assume there's cost savings over time, right, as well? I mean, going from diesel to electric. I feel like that must add to the advocacy point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those things are a little bit hard to quantify, but yes, but absolutely. I don't know if Ethan, if you can speak to more to that, but there's absolutely a cost savings there.
Yeah, well, yeah. So with respect to the maintenance in particular, right? I mean, it's just, you're spending less money because you have fewer breakdowns, and the economies of scale with EMUs are such that they're actually cheaper to buy than these bulk orders of the existing locomotives. I mean, that said, there is a significant capital investment up front because you need to switch over, you need to make some changes to the maintenance facilities, but and obviously train folks on that, but in the long term you are saving money.
Absolutely.
Jared?
Yes.
So I assume you will let us know what you need us all to do
Yes.
as we move forward.
Yes.
And I think we need marching orders. and I see the cities out here, obviously, and they've been instrumental in helping us to get to where we are.
Yeah.
In advocating to the state. But I see Matt on here, and I know Chris Osgood was on. I don't know if that's our pathway through, or if we're going, just let us know what you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think it's an all hands on deck thing, right? I think it's working with the city, to see what, to see what either resources or sort of lobbying efforts to sort of push the city can do, on their end. Then it's also just taking it directly to, to the State House. And also, part of this report is arming folks with the arming folks with the knowledge, to push back on some of the things. Or, oh, well, the ridership's too low. Well, no, actually, Fairmount ridership has been more resilient than all of the other lines during the pandemic. Well, but the ridership potential is just not there. Well, no, actually, the corridor is just as dense as Davis Square, and in fact, more people live there. And so I think that it's having those things so that when you're talking to, whether it's media or whether it's different elected officials, whoever, being able to have those arguments, and to really say, well, isn't the fact that the Fairmount corridor has some of the worst air quality in the city, isn't that enough to justify, the fact that we should electrify? And so I think that's the other thing, and I think that's one of the things that this report is really here for, is to underscore, like I said, a lot of the points that folks will sometimes use to sort of throw at, well, why we shouldn't transform the Fairmount Line.
Just outside of Newmarket, we're adding almost 1,000 new housing units within the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So within close walking distance of the Newmarket station and Upham's. I mean,
Right.
And that in and of itself is 1,000, additional potential riders. That are,
Right. That's a whole new. Yeah, I mean, and maybe those new developments are going to have maybe more parking than everybody wants, but they certainly have less parking than other developments would be in the suburbs because of that line. But then it's a chicken and egg thing, because they're only going to get that utilization that they've sort of calculated into their pro formas and whatnot, if that service is more reliable and is more frequent. So absolutely, yeah. And I think that's the other thing too, as far as marching orders, is just there's 18 really engaged folks on this call, but you all have your networks and everything, and so just making sure that those that the developers in Newmarket, that they know, that the employers know, that this transformation is something that should happen, and how they can fight. But absolutely, that's something we'll definitely follow up on, is what are those next steps, and what are the different roles that everybody can play.
It might be worth it, just as an aside, I know we're going through the Secretary of Transportation, but it might be worth it to bring the Secretary of Economic Development up to speed on it, and all, so that he can be an advocate.
Absolutely.
Just as a
Kenevi, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keneally.
Yeah, I'll just second what Sue said about coordination with us, coordination with the city, and Jared, I think it's been a good working relationship so far between city and Transit Matters, and I know we want to do more, and if that means working with developers around stations to make sure that they put in subsidies for either the line or infrastructure, working through the city's capital budget about station area planning, because we can do a lot of things to create more blue bikes accommodations, better bus stops, things in our streets to help people reach stations, and then to your point, advocating directly with you, or sort of in coordination with you on some key Fairmount Line things. So I think that's definitely a commitment that we have to improving the service, because of how vital it is for the city.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And yeah, and like I said, you brought up some stuff that makes total sense that I had neglected to mention, but absolutely, key things that the city can do with the sidewalks, that they own. And then, like I said, in the planning process, one fantastic thing that's happening at Epham's Corner is, Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation, which is an affordable housing developer. For folks who don't know, they're building a decently large project there that's going to have good number of mixed income units, and it's going to have some light industrial and office space. And as a part of that project, they're actually building a second entrance there. And I think that's really something that can really be leveraged is a development that's happening around those stations, or even in downtown, even in other places where, where there's lots of money and there's lots of projects from a transportation perspective happening there, similar to what we do with housing. I do think we should be talking about, if someone is building a $500 or $600 million building downtown, how can we get some of those monies into the communities that, I was looking at a really stark graphic the other day about investment in different communities, and how, some communities were seeing billions of dollars in investment, and Mattapan was seeing $3 in private home, private housing development. And so, we've got to think about the balance there, because there's just going to be fewer projects to do, to use some of those transportation mitigation monies. But absolutely, we should be looking at, things like steps. I mean, something Miranda mentioned that can be fixed with some of those monies would be just steps, elevators, and more lighting, right? So you don't have to go down this long, circuitous, pathway obscured by trees and all of that. So
that's an interesting thing, because we're actually partners with Dorchester Bay on that project, and it was very important to us to put that extra connection into the.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so we've been really involved, with that. But also, I sit on an IAG for an impact advisory group for a project right near Newmarket Station, and hadn't even thought, oh, maybe we could leverage community benefits for this type of project.
Yeah.
We need to figure that out. So Matt, I would like to follow up on that, on that ability to do that.
I love that. All right, we've got marching orders and steps, right here in the meeting. Awesome. All right, so I've got to head to another meeting, but Ethan is, and if folks, need to head out, definitely feel free. But if folks have other questions, I will turn it over to Ethan. He knows far more about this stuff anyway. So thanks to everybody for joining, and really appreciate it. And we're going to follow up soon with next steps, with the actual physical, or well, not physical, the actual report in web form. And like I said, appreciate all of you who are coming for information. Appreciate that. And then all of the folks who've been, longtime advocates on this fight, appreciate you as well. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jared.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks, Jared, for all your work.
Thank you.